best, worst. This is just kind of like generic, I guess.
Oh, I got one.
You got one. Okay. Let them
Oh, no, not on the cameras.
I have one that I'm debating whether. So maybe I should share two, and we can decide.
This is Pod Strangely Warmed, a place where we tell the good Methodist story, where we have conversations that invite followers of Jesus to seek after that loving, just, and free world that God imagines for us all, and have a little fun along the way. Hey, Pod Strangely Warm family, and happy New Year's Eve. It has been a great year here on Pod Strangely Warm. We've had amazing guests from across the totality of the Horizon Texas Conference. And one of the things we'd love to do each time we had our guests in the studio was to ask them, what is the best, worst, or weirdest moment you've experienced in ministry? Today's episode is a compilation episode of those best, worst, and weirdest moments from across the ministry of the Horizon Texas Conference. It was a heck of a lot of fun to record, and I hope you enjoy it.
I've got plenty, yeah.
Okay, go. Let's go.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
One time years ago, we wanted to do a neighborhood party, hot dog party, just, hey, everybody come out and just enjoy hot dogs. And so we were anticipating hundreds of people in our parking lot, and so we needed a hot dog grill that could churn out that many hot dogs. And I decided to build one out of cinder blocks and expanded metal. About 4 feet wide, 8 feet long, piece of metal grill, and the 2 layers of it for the charcoal, and ginormous, way overkill for cooking hot dogs.
Thousands of hot dogs, yeah.
And then partway through this experience, we thought, you know what? The charcoal is going to fall through the expanded metal and it's going to singe the parking lot, and we don't want to do that. And so we thought, well, let's just put something to protect it so we don't burn the parking lot. And so we put a piece of plywood at the bottom. And the logic was, any charcoal that's able to fall through that gap in the metal will break and fall apart before it really does anything to the plywood. That was wrong.
Yeah.
I see that now. And before we knew it, the whole piece of plywood at the same time burst into flames in the middle of cooking hot dogs. And there's a picture of me floating around the internet somewhere with a fire extinguisher as flames are flying out of this homemade grill. And so now there's hot dogs going, there's fire, they're black hot dogs, there's kids running around this grill, and their parents are freaking out because it's flames. And so we hit it with the fire extinguisher. And I don't know if you ever put out a fire with a fire extinguisher, but the billow of smoke is excessive. And so we went from, hey, what's going on over there by the hot dogs, to the entire parking lot and party is now, we are now all standing in probably very toxic smoke. I get reminded about that constantly.
On a regular basis.
On a regular basis. One of my, yeah.
I'll tell you all the story of when my Ash Wednesday video went, pseudo viral.
No.
Please tell me.
So fire again. I've got, year old, but this was the year after COVID, or 2 years after COVID, and Martin hadn't burned there. So I've got 2 years worth of really dry palm fronds.
Oh my gosh.
And I pull out, I ask, hey, anybody got a fire pit? So we burn these things. I want to make a little video to invite people to, every time I've done this before, you get a nice little fire going, and you get the crackle and, whatever. It's great. It's not lighting. So I start, messing with it and get it lit underneath it and create enough space for the oxygen to really boil up. So then it starts to light. And so I go over to my phone. It's on the little selfie stand over there, and I hit start and I start talking about Jesus, and and then it goes, it's as tall as me. And I keep talking about Jesus because I only kind of half see it out of the side of my eye. And then we post it, and it just starts going. And I'm like, is Ash Wednesday this interesting? It's like, no, fool, you started an inferno close to yourself. People are really trying to see if this thing's going to turn out tragic or not. And thankfully it didn't. All was well. And no sparks flew anywhere. The grass was great. But yeah, no, nothing like 6 foot flames to make people tune into the Ash Wednesday invitation video that was going to have like 10 people see it otherwise. So
Whatever you got to do.
I did think of the weirdest thing. Probably the weirdest thing that I did in ministry. It was a funeral for a dog. Was it a dog? Oh my goodness, I can't even remember if it was a dog or a cat. I think it was. Wait a minute. Oh, it was a cat funeral. Yeah, it was a cat funeral for this really sweet man who was definitely in grief about the loss of a pet, and so the guests at the funeral included like a neighbor that had a dog, and the dog and the cat apparently were friends in their lifetime, and we had a cat slideshow and did a liturgy, like a funeral for a cat.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just recognizing the real grief in that. But if you had told me before I went into seminary that I was like, I have pets, but I'm not like, it's a different relationship.
they're not your children.
They're not my children. So that's not my relationship with my animals. And so, but I recognize that for some people, their pets are like their children, like they're like family members, and there's a very deep bond and connection. And so, so I guess it became a weird thing. I didn't know going into seminary that at some point in my life, I would be preparing for a cat funeral.
Did the neighbor bring the dog to the church?
I don't think the dog came to the church, but the dog was definitely in the slideshow. But when I walked away from that funeral thinking, like, these are the kindest hearted people I've ever had the privilege to do ministry with.
Well, then I'll keep my cynical comment to myself.
Oh no, all the cynical comments went through my head. Like in the preparation, like I gotta keep a straight face for the whole thing. Cause part of me was very like cynical and probably a little anxious or nervous or feeling some sort of things that, sometimes come out.
Well, since you've already done that, I will in the future. The next.
Oh yeah, turn to me. I can do animal funerals now. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, for Ash Wednesday,
the dog asked to speak.
So one time I was going to visit this gentleman at the hospital. We'll call him John. And I get ready. I knock at the door because I always knock because you never know. Because trust me, I've almost walked in on some situations.
You make that mistake once.
Yes. And never again. So knock, and then I kind of peek in, slowly walk in, and I walk in, and I'm like, hi, introduce myself, that I'm from your church, and how are you feeling? And, and he was kind of coherent and talking a little bit, and he had a loved one there, and he kind of looked at me like, do I know you? And I said, well, yeah, I'm Joy. I'm from your church, and the person sitting there next to him said, well, who are you looking for? And I said, John. This isn't John. And I said, oh, well, bless you. Prayers for your healing. And I left, and he had been moved, and so. Yeah.
Always check the front desk.
Oh, yes. I have never made that mistake again. Oh, I have another thing. So I've had the same phone number. It's a 734 area code, which is from Michigan. And so, I started at a new church, and I was calling to follow up on people, and the guy answered, and I said, hi, this is Joy. I'm looking for so-and-so. And he hung up on me. And I was like, oh, maybe we just lost connection. So I call back, and he picks up the phone. He goes, stop calling me. And he hangs up again. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. He thought it was a telemarketer. And so I waited like another day, and it went straight to the voicemail, and it was those old-fashioned recording voicemails where you can actually hear it in the house. Right. And I introduced myself, and I said, yesterday I had called, and we must have been disconnected. He picks up the phone. He was so embarrassed. He goes, oh my goodness, I cannot believe I just yelled and hung up on my pastor. You have a 734 number. I thought it was a telemarketer. I get telemarketing calls all the time. And he was so embarrassed. And I said, oh, don't worry. It's okay. It's okay. And that has happened a few additional times since. So I just take it with a grain of salt, and I have to remind everybody, yeah, I'm from Michigan. So
she does love to remind people of that.
She does.
I got here as soon as I could, y'all.
So the interesting thing is that I met my husband working in United Methodist Church. We worked in youth ministry together for a long time. I remember there was one December, we were hosting a youth variety show to raise money for the mission trip that coming summer. And Leighton, my husband, got up there with another youth staff member, and they lip sang Breaking Free from High School Musical. And I was like, yeah, that's the person I need on my team for the rest of my life. Absolutely. Yeah.
You were sold.
Yeah.
Yeah, it made me think about really
Ash Wednesday, when I was at Hearst, that we were doing the imposition of ashes. Imposition of ashes. And it was
H's matter.
and it was all women that were doing it. Philip was leading the service, but he was not doing it. And so there were 4 women that were doing the ashes. And one of our choir members came up to me afterward and said, seeing me and one of our other, Sarah Garza, who's now a deacon, seeing those 2 women in that moment, it just brought her to tears because she'd never seen that growing up. And like, she was like, that was so foundational for her to see just that, like, because we were right in front, like, because the choir is singing and we're like, we had already done everybody else. And so we're like, oh, in the kind of behind the altar. And she was like, just stunned to see that. And I thought that's a powerful moment. Getting to see women doing things that people don't get to see women doing, I think that's pretty awesome. And now I can say, oh, one time I was recording a thing and said the wrong word instead of ashes. There you go.
When I first got to Cleburne, they had not had the history of having everybody sit up on the chancel. And, in terms of worship leaders, it was me, Marianne Browntrigg, and Melissa Turkett. And I'm like, no, we're sitting up here, and all y'all are, and they're like, oh. Marianne had kind of gotten used to the sitting on the front row thing and popping up at it. I'm like, no, we're all up here. And about 3 months later, Chloe came home after church, our middle daughter, and was playing Legos, right? And she made this little mini church thing. And, there were 3 preachers, and they were all women. And I took a picture. I said, Marianne, this is why. This is why we are doing this, right? Yeah. So they don't just assume, well, sure, Dad does it, but no,
right. But you're the odd one out.
Yeah, I'm the odd one. And there wasn't a dude Lego to be found in church that day, right? And that was a beautiful and wonderful thing, right? And
that's exactly why I always say yes to the career day at my kids' school, because I know that there's someone there who's never seen a woman clergy person before. So I explained in ecumenical terms what a clergy person is, what a faith leader is, but the questions are the best part. And so last year I got asked, why do you dress like a ninja? Which was awesome. I think the real question is, why do ninjas dress like clergy? But but then this year I got asked, why do you look like you're from Harry Potter?
I always did, like, now that I'm not serving in a local church, I don't get to wear a robe very often. But I always liked putting my robe on and like leaving it unzipped when I walked down the stairs because I felt like Professor Snape or something, because it like billows out behind you as you walk down the stairs. I was like, I'm in Snape mode. I mean, the fact that I picked Snape, that maybe says something about me. I don't know.
So at our house, we have a Hufflepuff of the Year is a title that you can win at our house. Like if you happen to find something that other people can't find, like you're the Hufflepuff of the Year. Yeah.
Nice. And eat a lot of toast.
We have 2 granddaughters. They're very special to me, obviously. Lily was born during COVID, and they live about 10 minutes from us. They moved up from Houston. Lily hadn't been baptized. COVID just kind of set everything back. And so when she was 2, our parents, our son Zach and his wife Emily, they decided, well, it's time. I knew that Lily, now 2.5, and I know her personality enough to know that if they had tried to hold her, she would want down. So I said, look, we're going to do this. Y'all just gather around the baptismal font. Just let the kids, don't try to restrain them. Well, they were up there, and Pop was in his robe and his element, and they were in a new playground. And they were running and going this way and that way around the font. And at one point in time, Lily goes to the altar rail in front of the font while I'm doing the ritual, and she looks at the congregation and she gives them a wet raspberry. I mean, just and everybody, oh, and of course I couldn't help but laugh. But when the ritual with her parents was done and it was time for her to be baptized, and she was having a good time playing, and the congregation was probably saying, oh, typical preacher's grandkid up there. I said, Lily, come here. And she got into my arms, and I put the waters of baptism on her little blonde curls and said, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And that was a sweet moment, and it was also a hilarious moment for the congregation. They were loving watching her, and they were loving watching what on earth I was going to do to get out of that one.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And so I think we all breathed a sigh of relief when she did come to me and settled into my arms long enough for me to truly baptize her. So,
What a blessing and what a joy.
Yeah, that was.
So I have a tattoo on the back of my arm that is a blender with a giant avocado next to it. And it comes from one of my favorite stories, which is when I went to Africa, to Tanzania specifically, to this tiny little town called Tarimi. And to me, it was the best embodiment of Genesis 18, where Abraham runs out to greet the three strangers. And it turns out that he hosted the Trinity at his table. And in it, it just felt like that's what happened. So in the midst of it, we were greeted by the headmaster and his family, and he knew that 5 people were coming to his house, and they had like 16 sodas. I think I might have like a fish story have grown the number of sodas, but there were way more sodas on the little tray than there were people coming to the house. And we go into the house, and there's this pitcher of like green thick juice on the table, and they pour it for us after we've had a soda, and we drink the juice, and we're like, what is this? And they're like, it's avocado juice. And like, we're like, it was like at the height of like juicing in America. So we're like, how does one juice an avocado?
Right.
So we asked the question, how does one juice an avocado? And the headmaster calls out to his wife, who's in the kitchen at that moment. And she brings out on a tray a blender with an avocado and a lemon and a glass of water. And they unplug the TV and very excitedly tell us, have you ever heard of a blender? And proceeds to make round 2 of avocado juice for us. So now we've had a soda, 2 rounds of like essentially a very thick, heavy smoothie. And we had a late lunch that day. And we are busting at the seams at this point. And then the next thing that we know, his wife comes back out of the kitchen, followed by their 4 kids, and then his brother and sister who lived in the neighborhood as well. And then the next door neighbors were behind them. And every single person was carrying a platter of food. And they lay it like in front of us. And it's this African feast. And the headmaster turns to the group of us gathered there and says, in Tarimi, there's a proverb that when someone enters your home, the more they eat, the more blessed your home will be. And so we're like, all right, we're going to have to suck it up and eat this food. And we did. But it was hospitality in its most genuine, authentic form that I think I've ever experienced. Like I said, it both felt like encountering Abraham running out to greet the strangers that, the headmaster really didn't know us that well. But also in some way it felt like we had dinner with the Trinity. And so it was just this beautiful, and it ended with his wife, whose name happened to be Sarah, of course, praying over us in Swahili and sending us on our way. And so I've always known hospitality for me is one of those like core kind of values of who we should be as Christians in that really authentic and genuine form. And so I've always wanted a way to express that via tattoo because that's who I am. And my best expression of that is a blender and avocado. And so,
Erin, don't you just love, you've probably heard that story before.
Yeah.
I've heard that story before. I'm very glad that Melissa at the end added the caveat that it felt like they had eaten with the Trinity because the rest of the storytelling was laying out that she was a part of the Trinity. Right? Because the hospitality was received by the Trinity. So absent that last little caveat there, Melissa, we kind of had to. And we were God going into the...
No.
This is what my tattoo means. No.
And I was the Trinity. No. It was both and.
When you said that, it made me think of a worst one when I was a sponsor of the youth group.
Okay.
It was worse because I got very ill. We were supposed to leave one place and go to another place, and I had been in the emergency room all night. I raised my head and said, just put me on the bus. And so they took me and laid me across the bus, and all the kids, and they told, Miss Simpson's really sick. Don't say anything to her. Don't say anything to her. So they all walked in, and I was just laying. I had been full of drugs and everything. I was laying there, and they were, is she dead? Is she dead? Okay. Is she okay? I was like, oh. And then so we started. I said, just put me on the bus and let me sleep. I'll be fine because I had stopped being sick. And then I rose up and said, I have to go to the bathroom. They were like, get her off the bus, get her off the bus, there's something wrong. But then we got to the place. I was better, and it was at Gulf Shores. And we had been days and days on the road, and we were supposed to go to the beach that afternoon and have some fun. They wouldn't let me go to the beach because I had been sick. It was too hot. So they put me in the laundry room, and I did all the laundry for everyone that afternoon instead of being able to go to the beach. That was one of my worst experiences,
Really strange experience I had was on a Holy Land trip. And we've got 90-something people, and we're in the Garden Tomb, or the Garden Tomb Garden, and we're having communion. We're having a worship service with communion, and all of a sudden, shots are fired. And it sounds like World War III is happening right over the wall, across the wall from where the garden is. I'm looking at our guide thinking, what? And I've just brought 90 people into World War III. Unfortunately, there was a situation, but fortunately it was not. It sounded like mortar shells going off. I mean, I thought we're getting bombed, but it was those sonic grenades that are just dispersing the crowd. Everything was okay. We were all okay. But for a moment, and they're looking at me like, what did you told us this would be safe.
What did you get sent to?
I was looking at the Garden Tomb because I was thinking, if anything happens, I'm running for that tomb because that's got a pretty good track record. So somebody can help me roll that stone over. I'm gonna.
Best. I was probably about 27 at my first full-time appointment, which was Valley Mills in Coyote. It was about a 9-minute drive from the Valley Mills parsonage to Coyote. I was very defeated. I had just visions of grandeur about myself. I thought I was going to save America. Not realizing Jesus had already done that. And I was driving out to Coyote because no one ever came and nothing ever happened. It was the same 30 people every week.
Right.
And just praying, Lord, do something. And that morning, there was a woman who had been kind of estranged from the church, estranged from her family, had lived somewhat of a difficult life, I think. And I gave the call that I still give at the end of the service. And I said, if you'd like to give your life to Jesus Christ, if you'd like to rededicate your life to Christ, experience the sacrament of baptism, or become a member at this church, we'd love to have you during this last hymn. And she came down the aisle and was crying and said she wanted to rededicate her life to Christ. And everybody kind of just stood there. And at the end of the service, the matriarch and the patriarch of the church, they exited the pew, walked down the center aisle, and embraced her. And because I was new to the church, I did not know that that was their ex-daughter-in-law. So the very first people to greet her were, people who knew and loved her and still loved her. That really taught me that I may never be the pastor of a mega church, but that every single person matters in God's economy. That's my best.
Yeah.
Still.
One of my weirdest in ministry happened at Coyote,
Let's
and
hear it.
it's not near as holy as that. When my mom served Valley Mills in Coyote, I was the really bad youth director and funeral singer.
Okay.
And occasional worship leader and things. But inevitably, I got called to do the weirdest funerals. And one of them at Coyote, the family insisted that we sing the Yellow Rose of Texas.
Oh my gosh.
And so I had to learn the Yellow Rose of Texas.
Right.
And I sang the Yellow Rose of Texas at a
wow.
funeral in Coyote.
Wow.
I can't sing it still anymore today, but I'm like, y'all know like the full story behind this song? Oh yeah, but like and it's connected how? I can't remember how it connected,
Right.
but it's somehow connected.
Yeah.
And between that and the Aggie War Hymn.
Right.
Now, we
Yes.
insisted that the Aggie War Hymn be played after the benediction.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So we've done with the Jesus stuff before
Yeah.
the Aggie War Hymn hits. But yeah.
I'm trying to see which I should tell first. Let me say the weirdest. I was preparing to go to another church. Interestingly, these two are connected. Wow. Now I'm sitting here thinking about it. There's a guy who was on-time usher. Just loved him. He's a really, really good guy, faithful. Wore a white suit every Sunday, and was on the post and was serious at the door, letting people in at appropriate times, inappropriate times, just tell them to wait, stuff like that. Well, the guy died. Just, the situation that happened. So at his funeral, and this was the first wedding, by the way, that I had performed. So with this guy, he and his wife who were in the church where I was pastoring. He died, and we had the funeral. Wife is there on the front row, and then at the funeral, another woman and family walks in. I hadn't seen them before. I don't know who they are. Right. So they come in, and then in the congregation, you hear this, you hear all this whispering going on. And I'm like, what is going on? What's happening? Nobody says anything to me, but you can feel the tension in the room. So we finish and finish, go do the funeral and everything. And then we have the reception, right? Right after church, we eating and stuff like that. And next thing you know, I start hearing people getting loud and louder with one another. And I'm like, what is going on? And somebody tells me, oh, that's so-and-so's, his wife, but that's so-and-so's, other family. I said, do what now? That's his other family. I said, oh, it's his ex. So I'm like, no. Current and current are in the same space. I said, what? How is this even possible? And noise, and it's kind of got louder. And I said, somebody else got to handle this. I got on out. I was like, I'm not getting into this. I'm not going to jail today. I'm behind this trying to defend the church and some people, and I'm leaving this. I was like, nah. So yeah, that weird and probably worse. You know what I mean? So yeah, that whole situation was strange because that church used to be an old nightclub. So that's a whole other part of the story. Yeah, I found out it was a nightclub. I was like, what? This is a nightclub? I said, no wonder we're having all of this mess going on in here. So yeah, weird setup. So anyway, when I was there, in the Waco district, I got the phone call to go to Meadowbrook. Now, I'd only been raised and served in black churches. That was my only thought and vision for myself. And so I get a phone call, and I was still at this church, down in Waco. And he said, hey, Kylan, I got an opportunity for you. And he sounded like a DS. I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, how would you like to come home? I was like, please. Yeah, I'm trying to get out of this mix of this, old club and some strange stuff happening. So he says, I'd like for you to come to, if you want to come to Fort Worth to pastor. I said, yeah. He said, but there's a catch. I said, well, what's the catch? He said, you got to be an associate pastor. Well, I was a licensed local pastor at the time. I was like, tell me more. And so he says, it's at Meadowbrook with me. And, Meadowbrook is a white church. I said, let me think about it. Let me pray about it. Let me talk to my family about it. So I still remember having this conversation, of course, with family and friends, stuff like that. Then I had this conversation with God. And the conversation was more of me saying, this isn't for me. I'm trying to tell God that I couldn't see myself going there because, and here's where my prejudice came in, some things that I hadn't dealt with. It's like, Lord, I'm cool around white people, but I don't want to worship with them because their worship style is much different than mine. They're quiet. They don't know how to really praise the Lord. They don't have no spirit, So I was like, Lord, I need a little something with it. I was like, I was at the music. I need a little something, Lord, and I don't know. And I run through this list of reasons why I shouldn't go in my mind. And clear as day, the Lord cut through all of the noise of me saying why, because this is a verbal conversation I'm having with God. And through the noise, I heard the Lord say, those are my people too. That humbled me. And then to have the experience that I can look back on absolutely changed my life. Changed my life. And it helped me understand my purpose and my call in the body of Christ, in the church in general, not just the United Methodist Church, just in general, to be this bridge builder between these cultures, that have been diametrically opposed. especially in the South. You know what I mean? In Texas here, in Fort Worth, just the history. And so, yeah, this has been a part of my work, whether it's one person at a time or groups at a time. Definitely been involved in trying to expose the biases that we have, and then to bridge the gap between those what were once biases to until there's a level of respect for various cultures. So yeah. Anyway, that's my other story there. That's my best. That's my best. That's right awesome. There. So one of my best anyway. Yeah. So yeah. Praise be to God.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
When I was in college, I served as kind of assistant to the pastor in a church. I had been youth director there, and then kind of went into that role. And so I was always up front in worship services. We were in the stewardship campaign, and they asked a man in the congregation, elderly gentleman who was a real character, to give a stewardship moment in the service. And so he stood up where he was, and he said, he had a gruff voice, and he said, "Well, giving ought to be like wetting your pants in a dark suit. It gives you a warm feeling, but no one else knows about it." And then he sat down. And I was up front, and the congregation, it was a mixture of shock, and they were falling out of the pews laughing. And it took a little bit for the pastor to sort of get the service going again after that.
Yeah, getting that train back on the tracks.
Oh, yeah.
I think we just experienced the shock in the floor laughing.
He did not do that.
No.
He spoke of it.
He
spoke of it, but he did not do that. Yeah. As far as I know. He was wearing a dark suit after all.
So maybe this will just be, I hope, maybe a little different than some other folks. So I spent a portion of my career doing creative arts for worship in the local church. Like, took my scene design background and all the things. And so I have made a lot of facilities staff very nervous with anything from paper mache to you name it. And I really like to empower volunteers. And so I just lay out lots and lots and lots of tarps. So I'd say that maybe my least successful moment, and thankfully I hope I had built some trust. We'll see, maybe he'll comment and tell me I had not built trust. But it was the fall, and I brought full-on bales of hay and melons in for the worship series. And that worship series was probably 1 week longer than the melons had in them. So by the time we cleaned it up, I did more cleaning than I had done on previous installations with the hay bales and the melons that had outlived their term. They were not available for Punkin' Chunkin', that's for sure.
Should I record another one?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, in case we don't want to use that one. I don't know if we want. All right, the other one. I have lots of them, but this other one, I was a student pastor in a 3-point circuit. And the churches, all three of the churches, instead of having a cross up at the front, they had Warner Sallman's Head of Christ, that sort of painting that was found in it, lots of Sunday school classrooms. And they had it. And they had a light over it. And this was true in all three of the churches. And I stood up to preach in one of the churches, and a woman in the congregation who was a delightful person said, "Preacher," and I said, "Yeah, Tommy Jack, what do you need?" And she said, "You forgot to turn on Jesus." And so I went back and I plugged in the light over the painting of Jesus, and then I began to preach after I had done that. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh, this could go on forever, because I'm like the Christmas that we lost Jesus and we couldn't find Jesus for the Nativity, that one preaches well. I think.
Yeah, it does. That, as we say in East Texas, that dog will hunt. Yeah.
I'm just going to keep being quiet, and Tim's going to keep cranking.
Keep cranking stories. Right. Yeah, we didn't even get on the mission trip train.
You should go there.
So far, we are at age 22, 23, 24. Tim, we hadn't gotten past 24, so we got some space to work with here.
Yeah, I'm not going to do the worst because it's the worst.
It's mixed company.
Mixed company. I'm just not going to do that. But I've had they weren't funny in the moment, but they're funny. So one, as a district superintendent, so especially my first year, I was trying to go visit every single church, right? And I go into a church, and I'm sitting, I'm a back row Methodist as a district superintendent. I just kind of am. So I was sitting back in the back third of the church. Comes to the end, and people are queuing up to go to communion, right? And so while I was waiting my turn to be the usher telling me to go for communion, this person, couple pews up, she leaned back and she goes, "Well, are you new to this church?" And I said, "Well, this is my first time here." And she said, "Really?" She goes, "But you look familiar." She said, "You've been here before, right?" And I said, "No, ma'am, I have not. I have not." She goes, "Well, what brings you here?" And I said, "Well, I'm your district superintendent." And without missing a beat, she goes, "Blech," and turned around. And I'm like, "Oh." It's first year, right? And I'm like,
Right.
"Oh, okay." So I remember getting up and getting in my line because I got up before her to go to communion, and she was talking to the people ahead of her. And I leaned over and I said, "It was going so well until she found out what I did." And then I just kept going, had communion. So and it was funny, and I get it. I get it. That's pretty funny. The other one happened when I was senior pastor at Hearst, and we were in the middle of COVID, and
Yep.
you remember those days, y'all do. I mean, you're talking into a camera for gosh sakes. Well, it was communion, and I'd realized that nobody had defrosted the bread, right?
Uh-oh.
So I'm like, okay, so that's fine. So I take a little
Frozen roll.
frozen roll, and I put it. I defrost it in the microwave, right? And so I put it. I took it out, and it was nice, warm, and squishy, and I thought, that's outstanding, right? And so, I put it on the communion table. We're getting ready to film, and I've covered it up, and we go through the service. And so we're about 45 minutes later, 50 minutes later, and we're about to. So I go to uncover it to present the body of Christ broken for you, and I lift up the roll, and I go to break it. It is as hard as a petrified rock, right? And it showed on camera. All right, and I go to break it, and I can't, so I dig my fingers into it, and it goes poof, and just kind of disintegrated. And I don't know how I held it together, because what I wanted to do was go, wow, that body really is broken, right? I mean, but it was the puff of the cloud of smoke, and our camera people and the other associates that were in the space are just dying laughing, and I'm having to hold it together through this. But I remember going, and Jesus took the cup, and it is one of those moments. Went back and looked at the still on that, and there's just poof.
Man, I wish you would have made a blooper reel going through COVID for all of the bloopers that we had. It's like, no, I'm starting over again. Start this prayer. No, I'm starting over again.
No. So those are mine.
Yeah, mine. Boy, I don't know if I can compete with that, Philip. But it's funny because mine is related to communion as well. So I was serving at the Owenwood Foundry in North Texas, and it was this high and holy day because we do baptisms by sprinkling, pouring, and immersion, and of course we didn't have an immersion pool there, so went to the Tractor Supply and bought an 8-foot horse trough, and so we were did a couple of immersions that day, and it was also Communion Sunday. So it was just, had these baptisms, had a great music, great sermon, great day, everything is going all fine, and so when we get to the time for communion. So I had never, I didn't grow up United Methodist. I grew up CME. And so I had really never had the whole King's Hawaiian bread, as the bread for communion and whatnot. And so, we're going through and, I'm breaking pieces and whatnot. And body of Christ broken for you, blood of Christ shed for you and whatnot. And so this little girl comes up to me and I'm breaking it off and say, body of Christ broken for you. And she dips in and she eats it. And she turned around and she looks at me and she said, "Can I have some more body?" I've never forgotten it. She's like, that body was really good. Right.
King's Hawaiian bread.
Oh, it's good.
So that's my best, I guess.
Kids do the funniest things.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I had a kid. Of course, you go down, you give him the body of Christ, and I had the cup, and this when I was an associate. This is the blood of Christ proves that Jesus loves you a whole bunch. And this little kid, she goes, "No thanks, I'm good." Same sort of thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Man, I think another one of the funniest things that ever happened it was opening worship of annual conference. It was at First Richardson. And, again, it's, well, these all communion related stories.
Because it's funny. There's a lot that can go wrong, man.
We're going down, people are kneeling at the altar about body of Christ broken for you, body of Christ broken for you, body of Christ broken for you. And so it must have been somebody who had not been in the United Methodist Church before, so went by body of Christ broken for you. And so once coming with the cup, they reach the cup and they're pulling the person's hands because they're going to take a drink out of it. And I'm seeing this tug of war. It's like, dip.
You don't want to drink the floaties, I promise.
Right. I'm like, and it wasn't like the fifth person in. This was like 25 down. Like, did you not see that the other people did not take a sip out of this? But that's the image I have. Is like, give it here. No.
Somebody wearing that grape juice.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, man. The second wedding I ever did was for my wife's little sister and her husband. They've been married forever now. But she was Southern Baptist. He was Roman Catholic. And they had the Methodists doing the wedding.
Oh, boy.
And they wanted communion. Naturally, this is the way things work. And so I said, sure, but you got to understand, we got at least 3 different understandings of Holy Communion going on in this moment in time. And so we do the whole thing where we make sure we got to serve everybody, not just the 2 of them. We, offer blessings for anybody who wants to be blessed rather than whatever. But my sister-in-law says, don't worry, I'll get the elements. So I said, okay, it's King's Hawaiian and grape juice. We should all be good.
Right.
And so she gets the King's Hawaiian and she gets sparkling grape juice.
Uh-oh.
And the chalices are clear glass. And so she gets sparkling red grape juice for everybody. And because she's in the white dress, sparkling white for her. So she can do intinction but not fear of getting anything on her dress, right? And so I serve them, and then we kind of hide the white chalice, right? Because it doesn't look the way communion normally does. But the red chalice has a little bit of a head to it, right? Because it's sparkling grape juice. And so we go through and serve, and we end up giving people communion. We give people blessings. It's a wonderful thing. But people aren't familiar with intinction, right? Because it's like only 5% of the crowd's Methodists, never done this before, right? We've got Baptists and Catholics, and everybody's kind of like, do what? And so our floaty quotient is higher than normal in this cup.
Floating on a head.
You're right. And so about 2/3 of the way through, there's just no saving this chalice anymore, right? And so I pull it back, and for like the last 15, 20 people, we pull the white back out, right? And continue to serve, and everything goes just fine. We get to the end of the wedding, and it's my second wedding. I'm a little nervous through the whole thing, right?
Yeah, sure.
But my folks are there as a part of it. During the reception, I'm talking with my dad afterwards, and he said, Jesus got a lot of credit at a wedding for turning water into wine, but somehow you turned grape juice into beer in the middle of communion. Because the white still had its head on it too, and it just magically appeared, 2/3 of the way through. So don't do sparkling grape juice for communion. It doesn't work all that well.
One of my best, because there's so many bests, I know that doesn't make any sense at all, but truly one of my best and coolest moments was when I was leading a spiritual retreat for women's ministry. And I had this cool idea. We were going to use that paper that you can actually like light up and it'll like disappear, like the flash paper.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And so I had them do the write down the things that they wanted to give to God, right? Mm-hmm. And like to let go, the things that they were holding on to that they wanted to let go of, right? We went outside, like this was in Prothrow, the beautiful like worship space, a beautiful retreat center that we have in the North Texas Conference, and we went down to go to like where we had some logs where we could light the fire, and then of course I'm like, crap, I forgot the lighter, right? To actually like light them on fire. So, and they were red, and I was just like, okay, so we crumpled them all up, and I was just like, all right, let's just go ahead and just throw them in there and just pray over them as we're giving them up to God. Like, as we were praying over it, somebody goes, oh my gosh, like there's a spark, and it started smoking. And then somebody came over and like took a stick and started kindling it, and they all started to evaporate away.
Wow.
And like you could see, and we're all weeping because we're like, oh my God, there was no fire there. There was like, it was just, soot, like, and the, remnants or whatever, but it started, literally all of them started catching on fire and starting to disappear. And I'm getting teary-eyed now. And then I had somebody come up to me and say, that was so impactful for me because last night, some friends and we were in this space and I had decided, we should probably set a fire. And I was the one who actually kindled that fire last night. And, when we had put it out, and if it wasn't for that fire that she started.
Oh, wow. That'll preach.
We wouldn't listen. Like all of our things that we had given up to God wouldn't have been sent up. And so like one of the most powerful, coolest experiences I've ever had that still brings me to tears to this day, for sure. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I've been in youth ministry for 20 years, and I like to think of myself as the youth minister who thinks of every worst case scenario when we do anything, only because I've had to learn the hard way from my first position as youth minister, because those kids really put me through the ringer. And so, like, we're talking about the youth group where I'm driving the church van full of kids, and the kid behind me thinks it'd be funny to lean over and cover my eyes. And that was the first time I went from being Youth Pastor Charlie to being Mr. Baber. You know what I'm saying? But I think the biggest life lesson I learned when I was in youth ministry there is that before you take your kids to a summer camp, make sure that they're accredited as a summer camp and not just like have a website that says they're a summer camp. And I think all of us are familiar when you go to a summer camp, you're going to have to unteach some bad theology that your kids have heard. So I knew like literally every sermon they heard, we'd have to have our own small group and be like, everything that person just said was very wrong. And that is the Holy Spirit in you telling you, this is weird. Let's not believe what they just told us. Apropos to nothing, on that same trip, one of the dad chaperones was trying to take the 15-passenger bus up the very curvy hill to camp. Got a little stuck, so he backed up, but then backed off the edge, and so the van was like this.
Teetering.
And we had to get all the kids out carefully and then get it towed. And so I was like a 23-year-old youth pastor at the time. And this is where my instincts for worst case scenarios kicked in, was at this specific camp that I hope no longer exists and which shall remain nameless, so that I do not get sued for defamation. I was at a annual conference meeting that shall not be named in the distant past.
Okay.
At this point, I was a clergy person. You know, sometimes things just come on the floor that you're just like, what did that person just say? And it was someone who got up and is a member of the clergy, I believe.
Okay.
And was like, Bishop, I want us to get rid of the denomination's mission statement of making disciples for the transformation of the world, because only God can make disciples and not us. And the bishop, like without missing a beat, said, oh, you mean get rid of Matthew 28? And I was like,
yes.
I just wanted to just shake that bishop's hand. That was so funny. It was so snarky.
Oh, yeah. That is.
We're talking about quirkiest, right? I had a kid, and it was Trek Week again, but we had a kid that, for some reason, the only way he would get out of his bed, and he was in the top bunk, is he would just throw himself off of it. So we had to try to coach him to not do that.
Yeah.
But the first time it happened, we're just laying there, and then we just hear bang, and he just pops up and goes to shower. But he just, from the top ropes, just throws himself off. And we're like, hey, don't do that anymore. Like, we had to check. We're like, you good?
Any
Thumbs
broken
up.
bones?
No, he just looked at us like we were the dummies. Like, this is the best way of doing this. It was scary, but
it's a high risk, high reward way of getting off.
No, yeah.
Oh man.
rough
It's so
one.
tempting just to jump off those top bunks
Oh,
as
yeah.
kids. I don't understand.
Something about it.
Yeah.
It's just like, man, I can be Jeff Hardy. You know, I can do this.
What's one too many wrestling
No.
tickets? Here we go.
So my little ones that I had one summer, like the really just able to be at camp for 48 hours, they all decided that they were going to shower with their clothes on, that they were going to wear the next day. So like they like put their new clothes on, got in the shower, and like dried off, and then wanted to get in bed with like their wet clothes that they were gonna.
No.
And I like the first girl did it, and it didn't connect what was going on because.
Right.
I'm trying to wrangle 14 little ones, and like that's my favorite age, but like it's a lot. It's overwhelming. And then so like the first girl did it, and I guess she told her friends, and then they were like, "That is a brilliant idea. I can't believe I never thought of that." And I was like, okay. So then like 2 more get in the shower, 3 more, how many ever in whatever cabin. Then it clicks what's going on, and then so I had to sit everybody down and be like, I understand you may think this is smart, but no. I was like, you can shower, wash your body, put the clothes, like dry off, then put those clothes on so you can sleep longer in the morning. Like, that's cool with me. I went through that phase as a kid. I think that's a common thing. But I was like, you can't just get in the shower with those clothes on. I was like, they're not going to dry in time. Oh. And they were like, but we don't understand. I was like, I'm not to be like I'm older, so I'm smarter, but that was one of those times where I had to be like, I'm older and smarter than you.
I have thought this through. Ask Susie how this experience is working out for her, the first kid who.
Now she doesn't have enough clothes because she's only here for 2 days, and mom only packed.
Oh man.
2 outfits. Yeah, it was
Yet one more reason why you always send your kid with at least 1 extra day's worth of clothes to camp.
Yeah, so it was when I was doing youth ministry with my husband. We were playing a game that involved running around the church and hiding and being found as we do. It was not a typical hide and seek game. I think we were playing Underground Church. I think that's what we were playing. Okay. Anyways, so I discovered that the windows were unlocked, which was great because I needed to make an escape. So I started hopping in and out of windows with my little group of kids. And so we were hopping in and out of windows. And before I knew it, all the lights were on in the church. And Josh is like, Kristen, get in here. What's going on? And the police officer was at the door because our neighbors, it was about 2 a.m., our neighbors noticed that people were climbing in and out of church windows and were very concerned that the church might be getting robbed. So I had to explain to Saginaw police that no, we were not indeed robbing the church. And yes, I am indeed the adult in charge, leading our kids to be very irresponsible, and I'm very sorry. And my pastors, I think, never heard that until now. And I will just let all the former pastors of Saginaw try to figure out under whose tenure that was.
I've got some names running through my head, some of which would join you in the mischief.
Yes, they would.
And so I think we're underselling the fact that the church's neighbors are up at 2 a.m. and looking outside.
They're paying
What mischief
attention.
are they engaged in? Because as my mama told me, nothing good happens at 2 a.m. So, that's good. That's good.
There you go. I have not had the police called on the church since then.
My first church was a church in the country. They said that someone wanted to be baptized, right? And they said that it was in the feeding trough.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, city girl me, feeding trough. What are they doing? They want to baptize the people in the feeding trough, Anyway, as it turned out, of course, it was a dedicated feeding trough that was dedicated for baptism, and it turned out it was all right. And it so happened that one of the people that was being baptized was larger than I, and so I never will forget, I had one person on one side and one person on the other side, and we got that person baptized, okay?
Very good.
So anyway, but that was one of my experiences. For me personally, one of the weirdest things is the blessing of the animals.
Okay. Tell me more.
I have had some dogs along the way, but I am basically not a pet person. Okay, I had 2 for my daughter, and if it wasn't for my love for my daughter, I would never have done that. Okay. However, one church in particular had the blessing of the animals, and I'm thinking, how in the world am I going to do this? Oh, this is not my thing.
Be blessed from a distance.
This is not my thing. And so anyway, I finally told him, I said, okay, you got to understand, this is way outside the box for me. But if you hold on to it and you bring it close enough to me to let me bless it, I will bless it. But I'm telling you, I'm not holding nothing. I'm not.
That's a smart boundary to set on the front end, because I got stuck with the weird animals because our senior pastor couldn't do weird animals. So I had snakes crawling up my forearm, blessing these things.
Oh.
No, thank you.
I just so anyway, we agreed, and it was fine, and I'm sure, the animals got blessed, and everybody was happy, but. That kind of took me way outside my comfort zone, okay?
When my mom was serving her first country church and I was her 15-year-old church musician, because that was what you were voluntold to do, we had a chili cook-off at the smaller of her 2 country churches. And, there's 40, 50 people in the little fellowship hall of Coyote Methodist Church. And that's largely a ranching kind of community. But they had a couple of city folks who had the country place, right? And they would come out periodically. And one of them insisted upon carrying a ferret around in a purse.
I'm sorry, what?
Like the ferrets?
Yes, they stink.
I know, but they kept it with them as like their carry-along pet. And I'm sure it was some designed pet bag, but it looked like a purse. And they brought the ferret to the chili cook-off. And about halfway through the chili cook-off, I'm looking across the room, and there's this just leap up from a table, and everybody's spinning in circles. The ferret got out of the purse and was just running all in and through the fellowship hall space there. And eventually, I'm like, some country boy's going to shoot that thing. That's what, it'll be on a spit here before we know it. But they caught the ferret, got it back in the purse, and they made a kind of quick exodus. But
Did she come back to church after that?
she came back to church, but the ferret did not.
I was going to say, was the ferret with her?
No, ferret was not allowed.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was early on in ministry. I'm a pastor at First Methodist, downtown Fort Worth. And at that time, we were a place where people who weren't members of the churches could have their wedding. We've since moved to it's just for members of the community, and that's the best answer. But it's a Saturday. I am going into the office, and I don't remember what I had been doing all week long. It was before I was preaching every Sunday. Okay. So I think it might have been seminary related. I'm not sure, but I needed to go to the church for something on my day off. And I'll never forget what I was wearing. I was wearing a long sleeve hooded t-shirt, jeans, and neon blue indoor soccer shoes. And because I'm just going there to let's get some books that I got to do like a paper for or something like that. And I don't remember if I had been leading a retreat or something, but I do remember I had not had a chance to get cleaned up. Right. Okay. So I'm kind of post retreat camping vibe. Right. I show up at the church and I see someone I know there. And they said, hey, we're looking for this pastor. This is a name I don't know. It's not someone I work with. We're expecting them for a wedding. And I said, oh, no, I'm sorry. I don't know. What time is the wedding? And they said, oh, it's 11:30. And I said, what time is it now? And they said, noon. And I said, do you guys need a someone to do the wedding? And they're like, yeah, we think we do. And so I said, okay, give me a second. And so I'm looking down at myself. And so I go and I get a robe and put on a robe and a stole over it. And I happen to be in the front office. One of my 90-year-old colleague is there meeting with a family who's talking about joining the church. And I notice he has on dress shoes. And I've got on these blue dress shoes. His name's Lamar Smith. He's super famous in our conference. Everyone knows and loves Lamar. And so I bust into their meeting and I say, Lamar, I have no time to explain. I need your shoes. And he goes, sure. And just takes off his shoes and gives them to me. And I run up to my office and I grab a wedding I had done the week before. So I had a script for a wedding, but it was for some of our best friends. So it's the most personal wedding you've ever heard, right? And so I don't know the names. And so I go and I see the bride, who's obviously very upset. And so I do some, just, hey, this is going to be all right. Kind of thing. And I say, what's your name? And she tells me her name. And I go to the husband, and he's from Nepal. And so he has a name I haven't heard before. And I was like, got it. Not a problem. And so I go, and they're the sweetest couple. They're so wonderful. I officiate the ceremony, and I do mess up one time on a name. But other than that, I make it through and I'm just winging it. As best I can, right?
Riffing off of the script you got.
Doing this wedding. Obviously, the family, everyone at this point, when it's 30 minutes late, they know that this is not on me, right? I'm call a pastor at this point. So I do it. I fill in for them, officiate their wedding, and afterwards, and so it was just like one of the most stressful, unique experiences. How often have you been like asked to just officiate a wedding with no notice at all? And I get a very, very sweet note from the father of the bride, who it comes to me in the mail, and he just says, "Thank you so much. I, really appreciate your willingness to help our family out when this thing had happened." And then he gives me, he writes a check, and he says, "Use this to keep some nice shoes in your office." And I did, and I do. So I now, today, in every office everywhere, I have a dress shirt, tie, slacks, and shoes. At any moment, if you need to get married or buried on no notice, I am ready for you. I'm not going to get caught in that situation again.
Oh, that's awesome. That is so good. Lamar, I need your shoes.
No problem.
Okay. That fits Lamar.
Didn't ask what, didn't care, just slipped them off, handed it to me, went back to his meeting. Yeah, he's 90. He's seen everything.
Welcome to this edition of DS's in the Wild. After a riveting day of general conference, they find themselves on their phones.
DS's in the Wild.
We found Philip in his natural habitat.
Crikey. Look at that. Look at that. Edlin's got his phone. He's on his phone, mate. Oh, God, he's wild. Look at him. Look at his eyes. Look at his eyes. They're dilated. They're dilated.
Philip's finally beginning to thaw out. You can see the color return to his face.
It's so cold here. Oh, but Edlin, don't bother him. No, he's fine. He's fine.
That's a nice.
I know I've gone to Scottish. Oh, no. Crikey. He's at it again. Look at him go. Oh, I know. Those will be some outtakes.
Yeah,
there'll be some outtakes there.
At the end of the next Best, Worst, and Weirdest, Dustin's going to break in and go, now for the weirdest moment of my ministry.
Crikey, Edlin's.
DS is in the wild.
In his natural habitat with his cell phone.
Y'all are a blessing and a mess, and it's wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us on Pod Strangely Warmed today. I hope and pray you laughed a little bit. I hope you were inspired, and I hope your heart was strangely warmed. If you've had a best, worst, or weirdest moment in your ministry, in the pulpit, as a lay leader in the church, as a staff member, we want to hear about it. So if you want to, in the comments, share with us a best, worst, or weirdest moment from your experience, please do. It is one of the ways in which we celebrate and embrace this idea that we are in ministry together with each other and with Christ. Until next time, I'm Daniel Hawkins, and this has been Pod Strangely Warmed. This has been Pod Strangely Warmed. If you enjoyed our conversation today, know that you can find us anywhere you find podcasts. On Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, Any and all the places, we are there. So if you want to continue the good United Methodist conversation that you've been a part of today, find us, like us, rate us, review us, and share with a friend so that the good news that is happening right here in our own midst can amplify even more.
I can't wait to see the compilation of stories like that. That's a great idea.